Lots of folks these days are planning to retire a little bit earlier than we used to. Years ago, particularly when a lot of people had pension plans instead of 401k plans, most people just were planning to work until they were 65 or 70. These days, a lot more people are planning to retire earlier than that, maybe your early 60s, mid to late 50s, somewhere in there. If that's your retirement plan, you are going to run into some unique opportunities and challenges. And in this video, we're going to cover the top 3 opportunities and top 3 challenges that you're likely to run into if you're planning a retirement at age 60. Let's start with the opportunities. Right off the bat, we throw it out there first. The government wants us to save for our retirement. That's why they give us access to all these great tax-advantaged retirement plans like 401ks, IRAs, 403bs, Roth accounts, all over the board. There are a lot of ways that we can save for our retirement. But there's a catch, right? They give us these nice tax benefits, but they don't want us using those accounts like piggy banks and pulling from them willy-nilly during our working years. They want the money to stay in there and compound and grow for our benefit long time. They don't want us pulling money out early. And for that reason, they impose early distribution penalties on retirement accounts that we might use. Most people these days across the US are using 401ks to save for their retirement, but what you're using may be something else. It could be a SEP IRA, simple IRA, 403b, 457, some mix of all of these different plans. Well, if you're planning for retirement at age 60, guess what? You're just barely old enough to be able to take money out of those retirement accounts free of that 10% penalty. Otherwise, if you take money out before you're 59 and a half, you're paying a 10% early withdrawal penalty to the IRS that we really, really want to avoid in general. So if you're retiring at 60, you're just old enough to where you can pull money out penalty free. The second opportunity that you're going to have in front of you has to do with taxation. If you're working in your 50s and you're planning on quitting your job and retiring at 60, chances are your income is probably going to drop then, meaning that you might be in a lower tax bracket and you might have a couple of tax planning opportunities. And not to skip ahead too far, but that's what our third opportunity today is too. So the second opportunity is what's called tax gain harvesting. If you're someone who has an investment portfolio in a taxable investment account, you pay tax every time you sell an investment at a gain. If you buy $10,000 worth of Apple stock, and then that stock goes from $10,000 to $15,000, if you sell it, you have a $5,000 capital gain that you get to pay tax on. And the rate that's applied to that capital gain depends on your income, and it depends on how long you've held it. If you've held that Apple stock in a taxable account for less than 1 year, you're paying tax on that $5,000 of gain at your ordinary income rate. But as soon as you've held that position, that investment for 366 days, long-term capital gains rates kick in, and they're a little bit lower than our income rate. The reason I mention this is because there's actually a 0% long-term capital gains bracket. Now, you might have to pay state or local taxes on top of that, but the point is that if you're working in your mid-50s, you're planning on retiring at 60, it may be the case that your income is low enough after you retire that you can sell some long-term investments and not pay a dime of tax on them if your income is low enough to fall into these brackets. It's a huge opportunity. The third opportunity also has to do with this concept of your income being lower. If you're someone who's dutifully saved for your retirement in a tax-deferred account, like a traditional IRA or a 401k plan, then when you take the money out of those accounts, it's going to be considered taxable income. Well, if your income falls after your early retirement and you find yourself in a lower bracket than you have been in the past and you expect to be in the future, then you might be a pretty good candidate for Roth IRA conversions. You take some money in those tax-deferred accounts, move them into a Roth account, and you pay tax at a lower rate than you otherwise would because your income is lower and you're in a lower bracket now. So while you're working, remember, the more income we make, the more tax we pay on it. While you're working, your income and tax rate's probably higher than it's going to be in retirement. So if you retire at 60, you find yourself in a lower bracket, That's where the window of opportunity comes into play. Now, why do we expect your tax bracket to increase at some point in the future? Well, number one, you might be eligible for Social Security benefits. You can't file for those at 60, based on your own benefit at least. You have to wait until at least 62, and a lot of people decide to wait until they're 67 or 70. And on top of that, all that tax deferred money that's sitting in your 401k, the IRS is going to force you to start taking money out of it when you're in your mid 70s through mandatory distributions. So those are two sources of income that you will have down the road that you don't have at age 60, which is what creates this window of opportunity. Now let's talk about the challenges. The biggest challenge, the one that you've probably already considered, is where are you going to get health care? If you're someone who's obtaining your health benefits, your health coverage from a workplace group benefit, and you retire at 60 and give that benefit up, as you probably know, you can't enroll in Medicare until you're 65. So you're going to have to come up with health benefits from somewhere else. Now, every state in the US has an exchange where you can obtain coverage for that period of time and bridge the gap, but the coverage and the benefits you get may be expensive or they may not cover exactly what you need. So the best thing to do here is to compare what the options are at an exchange and then maybe talk to an insurance broker about your options are outside of the marketplace in the private marketplace that a broker can introduce you to. So that's a challenge, and it's going to be an additional expense. An individual policy is probably greater than the cost of an individual policy, I should say, is probably higher than what you're going to wind up paying in Medicare premiums once you turn 65 and can enroll. Now, the second part of this is obviously your income. If you're retiring early, that's at age 60, that's before you have any kind of Social Security benefit coming in. If you're eligible for a pension, you might not be old enough to be able to start collecting that pension benefit. So in order to pay your bills, you're going to have to take money out of your nest egg, out of your assets every single month to keep the lights on, pay the credit card bill, and buy groceries. And that's doable, but without any guaranteed income coming in from Social Security or a pension, it just puts more stress on your long-term investments and your long-term savings, and it's something to be aware of. Now, the third challenge is another obvious one, but it's just general uncertainty. We're living a lot longer these days than we used to. If you're relatively healthy when you're 60 and you're going to retire, then there's a really good chance you might live into your mid 90s. And when you retire earlier than if you're retiring at 60 instead of 65, then that's 5 more years that your assets are going to have to sustain your lifestyle, but it's also 5 fewer years that you have uh, in front of you to put more money in the accounts and enjoy decent investment returns to grow that nest egg. So it's a double-edged sword. You have 5 fewer years to grow your savings and 5 more years under which those savings are expected to pay your expenses and support your lifestyle. And the longer that we stretch out that timeline, hey, anything can happen in the future, the more uncertainty it brings into the equation. And if you live into your mid 90s, that's 30, 35 years of life that we're expecting your savings to be able to support. And there's a fair amount more risk in that than if you waited 5 more years or 7 more years and retired at 65 or 67. I hope you liked today's video. If you did, make sure to hit the like button at the bottom of the screen and subscribe to the channel to make sure that you're notified anytime we come out with something new. On top of that, if you're not sure whether you're on track financially, you might want to check out our free wealth gauge assessment. There's a link for it in the comments. Basically, you click the link, you take 3 minutes to fill out some basic financial information about yourself. We take that information and run it through our financial planning software. Then we send you via email a short private video of our findings and 30,000-foot observation.